Good morning, everybody. It's Wednesday the 2nd of April. It's about 6:35 in the morning and I'm on my morning run, and started out at the Tamar Rowing Club for those who are local, and I'm running up the West Tamar highway towards Riverside and beyond. My camera appears to not be recording the audio as I was making it, picking up the background sounds as you can see, but not, or as you can hear, but not picking up the audio of me commentating. So this is a voiceover that's done later, so perhaps you don't get quite the same authentic feel as you would if I were running, but nevertheless I'll persevere and I'll try and sort out the problem with the camera. I thought I had solved it, but obviously I haven't. So I've reached the turnaround point, which is the little bridge that just goes over the creek before you go onto the track to the Tamar Island wetland. I can't remember the name of the creek and I can't remember the name of the track there, but it's just at the end of Riverside near the Metro bus turnaround, and I'm now on my way back. So I'm 6 kilometres into my run and I've got obviously another 6 kilometres to get back to where I started from, which, as I said, was at the Tamar Rowing Club down on West Tamar Road, just near the Patterson Bridge. Now, I thought what I would do in this video is talk about the Sam Kerr situation again. And you might think, gee, didn't you make a video about that before? Isn't that matter all done and dusted and settled, and what else can be said about it? And yes, I did make a video about it before, and yes, the matter is all done and dusted and settled as far as the court case goes, but there have been other developments since then, and I thought I would talk about those and say my piece about them, give you my thoughts about them. Now, for those who forgot, a very brief recap. Sam Kerr, Samantha Kerr, is an Australian women's football player. Football as in the round coat of football, or soccer as that's called in some places, but we call it football. She plays for Chelsea in the English Premier League women's competition and was captain of the Australian women's football team, which is called the Matildas. Now, in 2023 she was involved in an incident that has become somewhat notorious. After celebrating a big win with her partner, her team Chelsea had a big win over Liverpool, I think it was, and she and her partner were celebrating that big win, and Sam had too many amber ales and then got in a taxi, and there was a dispute between herself, her partner and the taxi driver about, first of all, paying the fare, but also to do with the mess that had been created in the back of the taxi as a result of one of them having too many amber fluids. The taxi driver got somewhat irate, called the police, who advised him to lock all the doors so that Sam and her partner couldn't escape, and to drive them to the nearest police station, which he did. When they reached the police station, the police officers came and took them into the station. I'm not sure if at that stage they were arrested or anything like that, but just taken in for questioning. And in the process of questioning and discussing the incident in the taxi and so on, Sam Kerr called a British police officer stupid and white, or white and stupid. I'm not sure which the order was, I can't remember now, but he objected to being called white, not stupid. He was white, but he objected to being called white, and he didn't object apparently to being called stupid. Eventually a prosecution was launched against Sam Kerr under the British equivalent of the Racial Discrimination Act or Racial Vilification Act or something like that. I'm not exactly sure of all the legal technicalities, I'm not a lawyer, but she was brought before a court. First of all, there was a magistrates' court that deemed there was a case to answer, and then she appeared in a higher court, and after a 5-day trial before a judge and jury, the jury found her not guilty of the offence that she was charged with. Had she been found guilty, she would have been liable for a fine and possibly a term of imprisonment, but the jury wisely perhaps found her not guilty of this particular offence, and she was free to go. Now, to be clear, I am not in any way condoning what she said. Her behaviour that day was at very best foolish and at worst dumb. She's hopefully learned a very painful lesson in terms of when you go out celebrating, you have to have at least one person in your group that is sober, who's not only the designated driver, but is a person who's designated to make sure that when things get a bit sticky, as they inevitably do when somebody has too many amber fluids, that your brain kicks in and your mouth stays closed and you do not say things that you will later regret. She also learned a very expensive lesson in terms of the court case, which would have probably cost her £50,000 or £60,000 in lawyers' fees, and that's just for the 5-day trial, without the pre-trial, without the magistrate's court appearance, and without all the times of interviewing witnesses and gathering statements and so on. Now, certainly she can afford it if her alleged salary of £800,000 a year is in fact true. She can certainly afford it, but I'm sure she would have been happy to spend the £50,000 or more on something else. But as I say, her behaviour that day was foolish and dumb. Whatever she may have thought of the police officer, there was probably no need for her to resort to that language, no matter what her level of frustration. She was clearly in the wrong by having made a mess in the back of the cab and first of all refusing to pay the fare and apparently kicking out the back window as a way to try and escape. She said she was in fear and so on, and she may well have been. But the fact that she behaved the way she did after having too many drinks was the beginning and the end of the problem. And when she made, and her lawyers made a suggestion that she might make a claim for costs against the Crown Prosecution Service, the judge said he was not inclined to even think about that, since she was the cause of the problem in the first place. So let's be clear, I'm not defending her. What I'm going to say now though is that in all sports, the governing body reserves for itself the right to make decisions about player behaviour off the field that may or may not have an impact on the game. No matter what the criminal justice system might decide, if in fact the matter is criminal, the governing body then has a right, or it claims a right, to take further disciplinary action. Now, in the case of Sam Kerr, she's now currently in Australia, not able to play because she's got an injured knee, hasn't played for nearly a year now, but she's out here because the team, the Matildas, are preparing for some friendly games, and she's here to lend her expertise and support and be with the team and those sorts of things. And the players are all very happy to have her around. They rightly look at her and think she's a pretty good player and she's got something to offer to them and so on, and they're happy to have her around the camp. She has had to front the board of the FFA, which is the Football Federation of Australia, and no doubt show a suitable amount of contrition and remorse, and express her contrition and remorse in such a way that the good administrators of the game of football in Australia have determined that she would be, when fit, eligible to be selected, and if in the coach's opinion suitable, to be captain as well. Now the point I'm going to make here is that the Football Federation decided that no further action was needed, so obviously Sam Kerr put on a good performance and showed a sufficient amount of contrition and a sufficient amount of remorse. And as the incident happened in 2023, most people have probably forgotten about it. In any case, they decided they would take no further action, and rightly, in my opinion, decided they were to take no further action. But sometimes what happens in these cases is that, or in matters like this, is that the governing body of the sport decide to take matters into their own hands, as I said, and the penalties that they impose upon people are entirely disproportionate to the offence that they may have committed and to the punishment that the judicial system, the legal system, has already dished out to them. And I'll give you a couple of examples. One is a fellow whose name I can't remember, who was playing for North Queensland at the time, and he was arrested for drunk driving, PCA, prescribed content of alcohol, I think is how the offence is described now. After an appropriate period, he was required to attend court, and the magistrate at the time imposed a fine of something like $2,000 or $2,500 or something, since it was his first offence, and the amount of alcohol he was in his body was in the mid-range, I think they call it, and he also imposed a suspension of licence, which I think was for 6 months, but may have been for longer. Now, the penalties that were imposed were within the range of penalties that were considered appropriate by the law, based on the seriousness of the offence, the person's criminal history to that point, and the alcohol content of their blood. After all that matter was resolved, the governing body of the National Rugby League, which is the governing body here, decided they would intervene in this matter, and they imposed a fine on this chap of something like $60,000. Now, allegedly his contract at that stage, and this was probably 5, maybe 10 years ago, his contract was worth something like $700,000 a year. So he could well and truly afford the $60,000. But that's not the point. The point is that the fine was disproportionate to the offence that he had committed. Now, the NRL governing body would argue, and do argue, well, we have to protect the image of the game, and we have to send a message to the players that we don't tolerate drink driving, as if other people in society do tolerate drink driving and do think drink driving is okay. We all accept that we shouldn't drink and drive, and if you get caught by the booze bus or the blow in the bag or whatever it is way that you're tested, you know that you're going to have to face court, you know that you're going to be fined, and you know that you are going to probably face a licence suspension. And I think it's the case now in all states that you're then going to have to install an interlock device on your car for a period of time. But you are not then going to be fined by your employer $60,000 later on. There's another case of again an NRL player who was caught or photographed by his friends. I should emphasise his friends, allegedly. Not allegedly doing, but his alleged friends committing what could only be described as a lewd act and a dumb act with an animal. It should be pointed out the animal was not harmed in any way. What he was doing was simulating the behaviour, and that was gross, certainly. Again, it was a case of somebody who had too much to drink one day, thought this would be a fun thing to do, and his friends thought it would be great to film it and put it on, share it amongst the social media and so on, and of course the NRL and the press picked it up. As a result, this particular chap was fined an enormous amount of money, something like $60,000 on the spot. He was suspended from playing for 8 weeks. Now, in that 8 weeks, the State of Origin teams were picked, and he would have been selected for the State of Origin team that year. The players who play in State of Origin earned $30,000 a game, plus they earn a $10,000 bonus for winning, which they did that year. So there was $100,000 of income that was foregone to him because of a dumb, silly act, plus the $60,000 fine which he had to pay. Again, his contract was such at the time that he could well afford the $60,000, and again, the code would say, well, we have to protect the image of the game, and we have to send a message we don't tolerate that sort of behaviour, and so on and so forth. But it just seemed to me that in both of those instances, the punishment was disproportionate to the offence. And to further back my argument here, you can think of situations that happen on the field where a player gets whacked in the head, for example, and has to go off on HIA, and then may not even continue for the rest of that game. The player who did the whacking in the head isn't sent to the sin bin and may be suspended a game or two, but in most cases now, players are fined, and the fines are piddling amounts of money, $1,200, $2,000, $3,000. That's like change that's found down the back of the lounge for some players the size of their contracts now. But if you commit one to do this indiscretion, that other people in society who are not footballers or not playing for the Matildas or playing in the NRL or any of the other sporting codes would also do, you are fined an amount that is disproportionate to the offence that you committed. Now, in the case of Samantha Kerr, to come back to her, there'd be people who are saying, well, we have to protect the image of the game, and Sam's a role model and she should know better, and so on and so forth. And yes, perhaps she is a role model. Whether she wants to be or not is another question, but perhaps she is a role model and she should have known better. I said that all along. You drink, it's likely that you're going to do something dumb, so either don't drink or have somebody there who's smart enough to say to you, before you do something dumb, keep your mouth shut, let's go home and let's sleep it off or whatever. But the argument that is put to us is that there are lots and lots of little girls who are going to play football this year, but now that Sam Kerr's done this terrible thing, they're going to throw their boots out of the playpen and they're never going to play football again, and their parents are not going to let them play football because of some terrible thing that Sam Kerr, who they don't know personally, and maybe the closest they've ever come to her is to be at a training clinic that she might have put on somewhere. They've now lost their faith in the game and they're thoroughly disillusioned. And my suggestion to that is, please, if your commitment to the game is so tenuous that somebody that you don't know, whose sole job in life is to play football, commits a dumb act for which they should be rightly criticised, if that sort of behaviour causes you to toss away your football boots and decide you're going to play netball in the future or something else, and I don't mean that in any way to be disparaging of netball, by the way, then I suggest that your commitment to the game was somewhat tenuous in the first place. The Chelsea Football Club that pay Sam Kerr's wages decided that no further action was taken. In my view, the Football Federation of Australia took the right action and decided that no further action would be required, and that when the appropriate time came for Sam Kerr and was declared fit to play again, if her form warranted it, she should be picked, and further, if the coach at the time thought she was the best candidate, she should be considered to be captain. So those are my thoughts. If you have an opinion, please leave it in the comments, and I will respond to it when I am made aware of it. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy the commentary or the scenery, and I'll talk to you again when I'm making the next video.